I still remember the sound of my father's voice that night, calm, steady, and cruel. He stood in front of our entire family, looked straight at me, and said, "My daughter has ruined my name." The room went silent. Every whisper, every breath froze. I felt my knees tremble, but I didn't cry. Not then. Because when the man you've spent your whole life trying to make proud calls you a disgrace, tears don't come. Only silence does. I could feel everyone's eyes burning through me, my brother smirking in the corner, my mother staring at the floor. No one spoke for me. Not a single soul. In that moment, I wasn't his daughter anymore. I was his shame. I wanted to scream the truth, to tell them who really destroyed our family's name. But I swallowed every word, every drop of rage, because I knew something they didn't. He wasn't the man they thought he was. He was hiding something that could break everything he built. And one day, I promised myself, the truth would speak louder than his lies. That was the night my silence died. Growing up in the Ward family felt like living inside a glass house, beautiful from the outside, but cold and fragile within. To everyone else, we were the perfect family. My father, Richard Ward, a respected businessman. My mother, Grace, the quiet shadow behind his success. My brother, Mark, the heir to the Ward name, confident, admired, flawless in my father's eyes. And then there was me, the reminder of everything he wished he could control. At dinners, we sat around a long oak table polished enough to see our reflections. Father spoke of discipline and respect, as if love was something you had to earn like a grade. Mark would boast about his new deals, and Dad would nod proudly. When I spoke, he'd simply say, "You should focus on helping your brother instead of wasting time on emotional nonsense." I'd smile politely, pretending it didn't sting. But it did. Every single time. Mother tried to soften things. She'd slip me an extra dessert when no one looked, whispering, "Don't take it to heart, Elena. He only knows how to love through control." But love shouldn't hurt this way. Love shouldn't make you feel invisible. Family gatherings were performances, laughter rehearsed, smiles worn like masks. Aunt Clara, my father's sister, never missed a chance to remind me how lucky I was. "Your father worked his whole life for this family name," she'd say. "Don't be the one to ruin it." I'd nod, even when I wanted to scream. The favoritism wasn't just visible, it was institutional. Mark had an office in Dad's company at 24, I had chores at home, managing the charity events no one cared about. My suggestions were dismissed, my ideas ignored. Still, I kept trying, bringing home certificates, organizing fundraisers, earning quiet praise from strangers. But to my father, those things didn't matter. "You're too emotional to lead," he'd say, eyes fixed on Mark. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear my parents arguing. My mother's voice trembling, "You're too harsh on her, Richard." And his reply, sharp as glass, "I'm preparing her for the world. Weakness doesn't survive in this family." Maybe he was right, weakness didn't survive. But silence did. And I was getting better at it every day. Then one evening, during a family reunion, Mark announced he was launching a new business using family connections. Everyone cheered. Father raised a toast, his pride unshakable. I stood beside them, smiling, but something inside me felt wrong, as if beneath that celebration, there was a secret waiting to explode. And when Father's eyes met mine across the room, cold, measuring, unloving, I realized something I had been too afraid to admit. Our family's unity wasn't built on love. It was built on fear, favoritism, and a truth my father would do anything to keep buried. And soon, that truth would find its voice, through me. The breaking point didn't come all at once, it crept in slowly, disguised as small humiliations that everyone else pretended not to notice. When my father announced he was updating his will, the atmosphere in our home changed. Suddenly, there were more dinners, more smiles, more praise, but none of it was meant for me. Mark was the center of every conversation. "My son will carry our legacy," Father said one evening, his voice heavy with pride. I remember the taste of that dinner, burnt roast and bitterness. I tried to stay calm. "Dad, I've been handling the foundation projects for 2 years. Shouldn't I be part of this discussion too?" He didn't even look up from his plate. "Elena, you're good at emotional things. Leave business to those who understand it." Mark chuckled, lifting his glass. "Yeah, sis, not everything's about feelings." Everyone laughed, except me. Even Mother forced a smile. That night, I sat alone on the back porch, listening to the crickets and the sound of my own heart breaking. I had done everything right, every charity event, every family function, every time I swallowed my pride. But it was never enough. Days later, word spread that father had transferred part of the company shares, all to Mark. The inheritance that once belonged to the Ward family was now legally his son's achievement. I found out through Aunt Clara, who couldn't wait to twist the knife. "Don't take it personally, dear," she said sweetly. "A father has to trust someone responsible." That was the moment I realized, in my father's eyes, I was never responsible. I was replaceable. Still, I tried to confront him calmly. I walked into his office, documents shaking in my hands. "Dad," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice, "I deserve to know why I was left out." He looked at me the way someone looks at an unwanted memory. "Because, Elena, you make decisions with your heart. This family runs on logic and discipline. You're too emotional to lead." Something inside me cracked. "You mean I'm too human?" He slammed the desk. "Don't twist my words. I built this name from nothing, and I won't let you destroy it with your weakness." "Destroy it?" I whispered. "You've already done that, you just don't see it." The room fell silent. His eyes hardened, daring me to say more. But I didn't. I walked out before the tears could win. From that day, things only worsened. Rumors began to circulate that I'd misused charity funds, that I'd embarrassed the family during a public event. Every whisper traced back to Mark, though I could never prove it. Invitations stopped coming. People avoided me in town. Mother tried to comfort me. "It'll pass, Elena. Just keep your head down." But I saw it in her eyes, fear. The kind of fear that keeps secrets locked away. One afternoon, I overheard father on the phone, voice low, saying, "Make sure her name isn't linked to the company anymore." My name, my blood, my family, erased. That night, I couldn't stay silent any longer. I stormed into the dining room where everyone's Saturday. "You think I don't know what you're doing?" I shouted. "You've turned me into your scapegoat to protect Mark." Mark smirked. "You're paranoid." But before I could respond, father stood up, his tone icy. "You've already ruined this family's name once, Elena. Don't make it worse." The words hit me like a slap. And that was the moment I realized they didn't just want me silent. They wanted me erased. But I wasn't going to disappear quietly anymore. After that night, something in me shifted, quietly, dangerously. I stopped trying to win their approval. But that didn't stop them from trying to break me further. Every family gathering became a stage for my humiliation. At Mark's birthday celebration, the house was overflowing with guests, business partners, family friends, people who worshipped my father's name. I stood near the corner, smiling politely, pretending not to feel out of place in my own home. When the speeches began, father raised his glass and said, "To Mark, the pride of our family, the son every parent dreams of." The crowd clapped. Then he turned to me with a smile sharp enough to cut. "And Elena, well, she's trying her best. Aren't you, dear?" Laughter. A few awkward glances. My chest burned, but I managed to nod. "Yes, Dad. Always trying." He grinned, satisfied with the performance. Afterward, as guests mingled, I overheard Aunt Clara whispering to someone near the buffet. "She used to be such a bright girl. Shame she turned out so unstable." They laughed, softly, like cruelty disguised as concern. I wanted to walk away, but I couldn't move. It was like my legs were frozen in the cement of years of silence. Later that night, Mother found me in the kitchen, sitting on the cold tile floor. "You shouldn't have come if you knew it would upset you," she said gently. I looked up at her, tears threatening to spill. "I came because I still believed I belonged here." She didn't respond, just placed her hand on my head like she was comforting a child who had already lost. Days turned into weeks, and my absence from family events became another rumor. "Elena can't handle pressure," Mark told father's associates one afternoon. "She's sensitive." That word, sensitive, became my curse. It followed me like a shadow. Then came the charity gala, the event I had organized for years. It was my pride, my one place of worth. But that year, I wasn't even invited as a planner. Mark had taken over, presenting it as his idea to expand the family's public image. Still, I attended. Quietly. As a guest. When Mark went on stage to announce the foundation's new direction, he said, "We're correcting past mistakes made under poor management."
The audience clapped. I felt my stomach twist.
He was talking about me, using my work to elevate his name. I stood there, surrounded by people smiling at lies, and I realized something. They had rewritten the story, and I had become the villain in my own life. After the event, I approached Father. My voice was steady, but my heart was chaos. "You let him take everything I built."
Why? He didn't hesitate.
"Because he deserves it, Elena. You should be grateful you're even part of this family."
Something inside me went cold.
I looked at him, this man I had once feared, admired, loved, and I saw not a father, but a dictator guarding a collapsing throne.
That night, I couldn't sleep.
I sat by the window, watching the rain hit the glass, and whispered to myself, "They've taken everything but my truth." And when the thunder struck outside, I made a silent vow. I would find what he was hiding, and when I did, the world would finally see who had truly ruined the Ward name. Because secrets don't stay buried forever. They wait for the storm to come. I used to believe betrayal had a sound, the crash of a door, the echo of a scream, the breaking of something fragile.
But I was wrong. Betrayal doesn't sound like destruction.
It sounds like silence, the kind that fills the room right after your world collapses.
It happened on a Sunday morning.
Father had called for a family meeting, his tone calm, businesslike, as if he were announcing a merger instead of dismantling a daughter's existence. We gathered in the living room, sunlight pouring through the tall windows, golden and cruel. Mark sat beside him, papers neatly stacked in front of them. Mother stood behind the sofa, her hands shaking slightly, her eyes avoiding mine.
Father cleared his throat.
"As you all know, we've been restructuring the company and our family assets. It's time to ensure everything is in responsible hands."
Something in my chest tightened.
I already knew what was coming, but I prayed, foolishly, that I was wrong. He continued, "Going forward, all business shares, the estate, and the trust will be managed solely by Mark. I've removed your name, Elena, from the Ward family accounts."
The words sliced through me like glass.
"What?"
I whispered. He didn't flinch.
"You've caused too much damage already. Your recklessness nearly ruined our reputation." "Recklessness?"
My voice cracked.
"You mean when you blamed me for Mark's failed deal?" Mark leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Elena, let's not start rewriting history." I turned to my mother, searching for something, anything.
She opened her mouth but said nothing. Not one word.
Father kept speaking, his tone detached. "You will receive a small monthly allowance. It's best you focus on rebuilding your life away from the company. Maybe that'll teach you responsibility."
Every syllable burned. Every pause was a dagger. "I've given my life to this family," I said, trembling. "I worked on every charity, every fundraiser, every project no one else cared about. And now you're just cutting me off." Father's gaze was steady, merciless. "You embarrassed this family. You leaked confidential information." "I didn't." I cried. "You know I didn't." He slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. You will not raise your voice at me in my house." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My house. The same house I had helped decorate, clean, fill with life, it was never mine. It never had been. Then came the final blow. He handed me a white envelope. "You're to move out within a week. The deed to the guest house has been reassigned." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. "You're throwing me out." His silence was my answer. I looked around, at my brother's smug grin, at my mother's trembling hands, at the family portraits lining the walls, all smiles, all lies. And something inside me broke for the last time. "Do you even hear yourself?" I whispered. "You're destroying your own daughter to protect your son's mistakes." Mark's smirk widened. "You always loved playing the victim, Elena." That did it. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. "You want a victim?" I said, my voice shaking with fury. "Fine. But when the truth comes out, remember this moment, because this is when you lost me." I walked out before the tears could fall in front of them. Outside, the sky was heavy and gray, as if even the weather had taken pity on me. I sat in my car for hours, staring at the gate of the house that had once been home. Every memory, every birthday, every dinner, every promise, turned to ashes in my mind. The following days were a blur. Friends I'd known for years stopped returning my calls.
Word had spread that I'd been cut off for misconduct. Father's version of the story traveled faster than I ever could.
Even the charity board I'd founded asked me to step down.
It's best for the image, they said.
Image. Always image.
At night, the loneliness was suffocating. I'd stare at the ceiling, hearing my father's words echoing, reckless, disgrace, ungrateful.
There were moments I wanted to disappear completely.
But beneath the heartbreak,
something else began to grow. A seed. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't hatred either. It was something colder. Sharper.
The need for truth. The need for justice. Because deep down, I knew something he didn't want anyone to find out. The honor he protected so fiercely was built on corruption, not integrity. And I still had one thing left, the will to uncover it. That night, I stood by the window of my small rented apartment, clutching the envelope he'd handed me, the symbol of my exile, and I whispered to myself, "You took my home, Father.
But I still have your secret.
And one day, it will be the very thing that destroys you." After the disinheritance, the first nights were all noise, my own heartbeat, the distant hum of the city, the replay of every cutting word.
I could have crumbled. Instead I learned to breathe with purpose. Grief sharpened into will.
Pain braided itself into focus.
I started small.
I sorted through the few things I had left from the house, a stack of old charity ledgers, a yellowed checkbook with my father's looping signature, a photograph of him with Pastor John at a fundraiser. In those quiet hours, I let anger teach me patience. Revenge needed planning, not pity.
I reached out to people I'd once trusted in secret.
Ethan answered on the second ring, his voice still soft, carrying the same memory of me he'd abandoned. "I don't want to get involved," he warned.
I kept my voice steady.
"This isn't for me, Ethan. It's for the truth." He paused, then said, "All right.
I'll look into Mark's accounts."
His help would be dangerous, a bridge back into the world they'd closed, but useful. Next, I found Mrs. Alvarez, the retired accountant who'd quietly managed their books before Mark took over. She lived alone, hands stained with ink and coffee, eyes that had seen too much. When I showed her a photocopy of a ledger, she swallowed and whispered, "This isn't right." She agreed to compare numbers if I could get her original documents. Getting those would mean going where I'd promised never to go, Dad's office, the locked cabinet, but promises had already been broken.
I trained myself to lie calmly.
I learned how to move through the business wing without looking like a trespasser, an afternoon meeting booked under a fake volunteer group, a borrowed clipboard, a confident stride. I felt my childhood fear dissolve the moment the lock clicked open and the smell of Richard's paper and coffee hit me. The documents were there. Transfers labeled as charity that funneled to shell companies, receipts with Pastor John's initials, meeting minutes edited after the fact. My hands trembled, not from fear now, but from the cold accuracy of proof. I reached out to Pastor John, too, but carefully. I didn't accuse. I asked questions about dates and signings. He answered with a kind of puzzled defensiveness that made it possible he'd been used. His distance was useful. If he testified that he'd signed things without reading them, it would cut the legs from under Dad's measured facade. Then I found an ally I hadn't expected, Olivia. She had watched me be erased and finally admitted, voice small, "I don't want to live in their lies." She agreed to keep my meeting secret and to feed me small details, who withdrew money, which board members had been paid off. Her fear would protect us. Her loyalty would be our quiet weapon. Every move carried weight. I knew I was stepping into places that could get me arrested, or worse, completely destroyed if I failed. There were moments of doubt, when I thought about leaving it alone, of disappearing quietly. But each memory of my father's public condemnation pushed me forward.
My plan wasn't a single blow.
It was a slow machine. Gather irrefutable records, secure testimonies from those who'd been signed on blind, and assemble a timeline that proved the corruption had been deliberate, not mine. I would not shout accusations into empty rooms. I would let documents speak, let transfers, dates, and signatures build the case. I would expose the architecture of their lies in the clearest light possible. At night, I rehearsed how I would stand before them, how I would speak without breaking. I practiced the calmness of someone who had already lost everything and found, to her own surprise, that she had become quieter and more dangerous for it. When I held the first folder of evidence in my hands, the cold weight of it steadied me. I no longer felt like a woman begging for a place at a table.
I felt like the person who would finally set the record straight. Tomorrow is the Ward Foundation banquet, the perfect stage. I have the proof, the witnesses, and a plan. The only question left is whether I will step up and use it. The night of the Ward Foundation banquet glowed with chandeliers and whispers, a kingdom built on lies, polished until it sparkled. I stood near the back of the ballroom, my pulse steady but fierce beneath my calm. I wore black, simple and sharp, not mourning, but ready. The guests shimmered in sequins and pride, unaware that by the end of the night, the empire they admired would crumble. Father took the stage, his voice smooth and confident. "Tonight, we celebrate legacy," he declared. "The Ward name stands for honesty, for family, for honor." Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. I watched him smile, that same proud, hollow smile he used to destroy me. My fingers tightened around the folder in my bag. Letters, statements, proof. My weapon wasn't rage. It was truth. When the applause faded, I began to walk forward. Every click of my heels echoed like a countdown. Heads turned. Father's speech faltered. "Elena," he said, confusion in his voice. "This isn't your place." "Exactly," I replied, stepping onto the stage. "It never was." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mother froze at the front table, Mark's face pale beneath the lights. "I wasn't planning to speak," I continued, my voice calm but cutting. "But since this event is about legacy, I think the people here deserve to know what our family's legacy truly is." Father tried to smile through clenched teeth. "This is neither the time nor the place." "Oh, I think it's perfect." I pulled a USB from my bag and handed it to the technician by the projector. "Play it," I said. A hush fell over the room as the screen behind us flickered to life. First came scanned documents, company transfers labeled as donations, each redirecting thousands to shell accounts in Mark's name. Then, signatures, my father's, neatly aligned beside Pastor John's, authorizing illegal transactions under the Ward Foundation. Gasps turned into murmurs. Aunt Clara dropped her champagne. "This can't be real," someone whispered. I turned to the audience. My father accused me of destroying our name. But it was him, forging, bribing, hiding behind charity while stealing from those he swore to help. Father's voice thundered. "You have no right." I faced him, trembling but unafraid. "You took everything from me. My home. My dignity. My name. But you couldn't take the truth." Mark jumped up, shouting, "She's lying. She's obsessed." The next slide appeared, his own email chain, signing off on the money transfers. The room erupted. Reporters grabbed their phones. Mother pressed her hands over her mouth. And father, the man who built his life on control, could only stare, color draining from his face. "You humiliated me once," I said quietly, voice trembling. "Tonight, I return the favor, not out of hatred, but out of justice." He stepped closer, his voice desperate now. "Elena, stop this. You'll destroy everything." I looked him in the eyes, the man I once begged to love me. "No, father. You destroyed it yourself. I'm just showing everyone what's left." Security and murmurs blurred together. The crowd was a sea of shock and betrayal. Someone shouted for order, but there was no order left to keep. The empire of the Wards was falling in real time, under chandeliers and champagne, just as beautifully as he'd once pretended it stood. As the projector dimmed, I turned and walked off the stage. Behind me, his voice cracked, not in anger, but in something that sounded almost like fear. "Elena, please." For the first time in my life, he sounded small. I didn't look back. My hands were shaking, but my heart felt light, lighter than it had in years. The truth had finally spoken. And as I stepped out into the cold night, the applause that broke behind me wasn't for him anymore. It was for me, for the daughter who refused to stay silent. The Ward name had been destroyed that night, but for the first time, I felt free. The morning after the banquet felt eerily quiet, the kind of silence that follows a storm once it's done breaking everything open. The newspapers hit the stands before sunrise. Headlines screamed Ward Foundation scandal exposed at charity gala. By noon, the news had spread through the entire town. The Ward name, once a symbol of pride, had become a cautionary tale. I sat by the window of my small apartment, coffee untouched, watching the sunlight spill across the floor. For the first time in years, I wasn't trembling. There was no fear, no guilt, Only a strange stillness.
The phone rang nonstop that day. Reporters, old friends, even strangers offering sympathy.
I didn't answer any of them.
Some calls were from numbers I recognized, my mother, Olivia, even Ethan, but I let them all go to voicemail.
Sometimes peace means not explaining anymore. That evening, a knock came at my door.
When I opened it, my mother stood there, her eyes swollen from crying. She didn't say a word at first, just walked in and looked around the small apartment, taking in the life I'd built from what they'd thrown away. Finally, she whispered, "He's broken, Elena. Your father, he doesn't speak anymore."
I nodded quietly.
Truth has that effect on people who live off lies.
Tears welled in her eyes.
I should have defended you. I was a coward. I reached for her hand. You were surviving.
We all were. We sat together in silence.
For the first time, it didn't feel heavy. She looked at me, not as a mother looking down at her daughter, but as a woman looking at another who had endured what she couldn't. You did what none of us had the courage to do, she said. You ended it.
Her words didn't feel like victory. They felt like closure.
A few days later, I visited the Ward estate one last time, not to gloat, but to let go. The once busy house stood quiet, the grand hall empty. Family portraits had been taken down, leaving pale outlines where our smiles once hung. Father was in his study, alone, staring at the empty desk where his empire used to rest. He looked up when I entered, his face aged years beyond his time. "You've destroyed me," he said softly. I met his gaze, calm, steady.
"No, Father.
I just stopped letting you destroy me."
He didn't respond. There was nothing left to say.
I turned and walked away, each step lighter than the last. Outside, the air felt cleaner, sharp, real. As I reached the gate, I looked back one last time and whispered the words I'd been holding for years.
Respect built on fear will always crumble.
But dignity built on truth never fades. And then, I left, not with revenge in my heart, but peace in my soul. Days turned into weeks, and life found its quiet rhythm again. I joined a new foundation, one that truly helped people, not just pretended to. People began to know me not as Richard Ward's daughter, but as Elena, the woman who stood up for herself when no one else would. Sometimes I still think about that night, the lights, the silence after the truth, the freedom that followed.
It wasn't victory I found that evening. It was myself.